on the calibration.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Mike Kramer. I'm the Calibration Program Manager at Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation. And I'm going to present today's webinar. As you can see, the topic is purchasing, which is encompassing the current 17025 Section 4.6. This is actually a repeat from last month. Last month, apparently, they had some technical difficulties. I'd like to apologize on behalf of Perry PJLA in regards to those folks of you all that signed in. You got to see the presentation, but I understand there was no audio. So hopefully I'm coming in loud and clear. And we're going to go ahead and run through this information again. Again, thank you all for logging in. As always, this webinar is being recorded. Hence, if you have a colleague or someone you know who missed this and could not be with us, on our website, www.pjlabs.com, under training, we have a webinar link, and we have a link for recorded webinars. So under that particular link, we have a vast array of these monthly webinars that we've done over the last few years. So as always, I always tell folks this, that even if you're present, you may want to just go ahead and visit that. There may be some areas, they're all labeled as according to what the topic entails, and you all can, if you have an interest in one, listen to the recorded version. Again, as always, there's going to be an opportunity at the end of the webinar to ask some questions. I have Miss Jenny Lipinski that's going to help me field those questions, and she's at our headquarters in Troy, Michigan, and relay those on to me. We'll discuss that further at the end of the webinar. So we're going to go ahead and start today's presentation, which Section 4.6, purchasing. The most common services by this requirement is equipment calibration. However, any product or service that affects the integrity of the test or calibrations being undertaken should be included. Things that come to mind, this is not, of course, an all-encompassing list. Any, excuse me, reference materials that you're using, any equipment, proficiency testing providers. If you're using a third-party proficiency testing provider, even your accreditation service provider. We appreciate those of you all who are with PJLA. There are choices out there. We have our credentials, and which should be taken into consideration when you choose accreditation service providers. Also, software or information services that's utilized, that's done in conjunction with the testing or calibration. Chemicals. I know a lot of testing laboratories order and use an array of chemicals that go into their testing. So 461, and this is 461 out of the current 17025, and this is taken right out of the standard. Laboratories shall have a policy and procedure for the selection and purchasing of service and supplies it uses that affect the quality of the test and or calibration. Procedures shall exist for the purchase, reception, and storage of reagents and laboratory consumable materials relevant for the testing calibration. So as I always say, that word shall, that's a requirement. So this comes right out of the standard. So basically, a policy is a general rule. A procedure tells you how to do something. A work instruction, an SOP, something that instructs you how to implement perhaps a policy that you have in your lab. And in this particular case, we're talking about purchasing. So one thing that was specified in 461 was storage consideration. So once the product is purchased, there may be need to keep the product or the artifact viable for a future date. Needed to prevent it from reacting with other chemicals or the physical environment. Prevent it from producing unsafe conditions, or some things that need to be considered when storing purchased reagents, chemicals, or products. Of course, minimize risks during an emergency. Incorrect storage may lead to deterioration of the material to an impure, unsafe, or explosive condition. The integrity of the container may also be compromised. So in certain instances, you may actually need to monitor conditions. For example, if moisture loss is going to affect the integrity of the reagent or consumable material, and the material needs to be stored prior to usage, and that humidity levels need to be maintained, that may be a need to actually monitor and assure that those conditions are not going to assure those conditions are going to be met, and assure that the integrity of the reagent or consumable materials are not going to be lost due to where they were stored. Okay, 462, the laboratory shall ensure that purchase supplies and reagents and consumable materials that affect the quality of test intercalibrations are not used until they have been inspected or otherwise verified as complying with the standard specifications or requirements defined in the methods where the test intercalibration is concerned. These services and supplies used shall comply with specified requirements. Records of action taken to ensure compliances shall be maintained. So quite a bit of information there. You as a testing or calibration lab, when you're going to purchase a piece of equipment, a reagent, a standard, a calibration, you're going to know what those specified requirements are. So you're going to be assured that any specified requirement is adhered to once the artifact, chemical, reagent is returned. So testing laboratories often use QC, quality control data, to demonstrate supplies, reagents, and consumables. Calibration labs is often a review with the in the area of calibration. If it is in fact a piece of equipment, a standard just being sent off for calibration, calibration is often a review of the return artifacts, ensure they're still intact, and with the calibration report. So you may be utilizing a source because they are perhaps 17025 accredited. You want to assure that traceability, for example, that the report that you're actually going to get is actually going to come under the lab scope of accreditation. Just because a company is 17025 accredited does not mean that you're going to get an accredited calibration with all the required data. So, in a nutshell, with calibration, you want to get a calibration report. I've been involved in this quite a few years now. By involved in, I mean with 17025 calibration in general, actually doing assessment. And I realized over time calibration reports are now something that companies are just taking, putting it in the file for something to show an auditor or an assessor when they show up at their door. These are now being reviewed more regularly as a routine practice when items are calibrated. So when the reports come in, you're going to look at the data. What I have on the screen now is a sample temperature humidity indicating device, and this is an example of data, raw data out, which would come off of a calibration report. So one thing you always want to review when the report comes in is you want to look at the as-found data. So that is actually that data that the calibration company, calibration lab, and I call it as used, found it when they calibrated. So in other words, this particular sample, the as-found data at 25 degrees read 25.06. You see a specification of 0.26. You see an uncertainty of 0.13. So even with taking measurement uncertainty into account, that is a clear path. Same with the relative humidity. So we have a clear path. If that was a fail, that would be should set off some lights, trigger some alarms that meant that it was actually being used while it was out of specification. Hence, that should trigger implementation of Section 4.9, control of non-conforming calibration or testing work. So in other words, the device was actually used while it was out of specifications. So hence, that procedure would need to be employed. Okay. Also want to assure that the specs are exactly what you specified in submitting the artifacts for calibration, and that actually that the uncertainty was taken into account. That's a requirement calibration labs when a statement of compliance is made, pass, fail, intolerance, out of tolerance, that uncertainty would need to be taken into account. But that is something that should be verified in reviewing certificates. Again, this particular example, you're utilizing a 17025 provider. You want to ensure when you're making this purchase that if that is a requirement, just because they're 17025 accredited does not mean that it's going to be under their scope of accreditation. So in this particular instance, here's an example of a scope that includes thermodynamics and relative humidity, in which the particular example, that was the lab, they provided those reports to you, and they were done on an accredited type report. This is a clear indication that they are accredited, and they are accredited to do that particular calibration. So these are items that for calibration, particularly if you're looking for traceability and 17025 accreditation, that would need to be reviewed. Testing, same thing. The report comes in, certificate of analysis. You want to review that, assure that it's within the specifications that you need, ensure that there was nothing was detected that shouldn't have been detected. Okay, and records of action taken to check compliance. So records need to be maintained. That could be, as specified before with testing labs, that could be QC check. That could be captured in a control chart, such as that picture on the right. Could be an indication of just an approved stamp and a signature. I used to utilize the packing list and file that away as evidence with a stamp like that and a signature that it was inspected and it indeed did comply with the purchasing document and that specifications and requirement that was specified on the purchase order. So looking for records just to assure that that there was a check to assure that the purchased product chemical was checked and assured that it was exactly what it was supposed to be when the order was placed. So in a nutshell, the standard requires services and supplies are not used until they have been inspected or otherwise verified as compliant. The procedure for defining how purchase or supplies are received must include the method by which the review will be conducted. Physical consumable supplies are compared to the purchase order to be done through verification of the label. Upon receipt, if a calibration review is rejected, it will require replacement with a certificate that correctly addresses all requirements in 510. Section 510 is a section in reporting the results in 17025. So as earlier specified, you want to assure that you're getting an accredited type report. Just because the company is accredited, you may not be getting that report. So 510 is a section that you may want to verify your calibration report just to ensure that it is encompassing all those requirements. Okay, purchasing documents, 463. Purchasing documents for items affecting the quality of laboratory's output shall contain data describing the services and supplies ordered. These purchasing documents shall be reviewed and approved for technical content prior to release. So in other words, when a critical supply is ordered, you want to have somebody's eyes on the purchasing document who is technically competent and knowledgeable about what needs to be ordered and knowledgeable concerning the testing or calibration that it's going to be used in regards to. Note in 17025, the description may include type, class, grade, precise identification, specifications, drawing, inspection, instruction, other technical data including approval of test results, the quality required in the management system standard under which they were made. So quite often when I am an assessor, I will ask to see just for compliance with this section, if the company is using purchase orders, to see those purchase orders, see if sufficient information is on the purchase order. And ideally, I want to see somebody's eyes, i.e. a signature, on the purchasing document. So in large organizations, multiple persons may initiate the requisition. And in smaller organizations, it may be very informal. However, the review needs to be recorded. Okay, just to sort of depict what we went over in 463. Here's an example of a purchase order, which would not meet the requirement. A couple things here. Please certify 12-piece weight set. Certify to what? What class? You can certify it as a piece of junk. You can certify it as a doorstop. Not enough information there. Purposely put Jane Doe Administrative Assistant under the assumption that this particular individual is not involved in the calibration testing that's being undertaken, that is filling out this purchase order. I actually did an assessment about a year ago where we looked at the calibration report. It was not an accredited report. I actually did a root cause and went back and looked at the purchasing document, and it was something similar to this. Called the company and they specified, well, you didn't ask for an accredited type report. And the particular purchase order looked very similar to what I have depicted here. So on this other screen, this falls right in line with the requirements of 17025. You can see a lot more detail. This is a particular example of the previous purchase order taken further. Same weight set. Please calibrate chronometer, 12-piece weight set, 1 gram to 1 kilogram. Serial number 345683, 2ASTM E617 Class 1 tolerance, and specifications. So that's pretty clear what's needed there. Provide accredited calibration in accordance with your PJLA. Scope of accreditation include before and after data with measurement uncertainty. Document a 1-year recall date on the reported calibration. Advise if any standards do not meet Class 1 as found tolerance. If you noticed under there, same individual processed the order. However, we have clear indication that it was reviewed for technical content. And this example here, we have signature of Will Smith, service manager. So this is 463, I'm sorry, is specified. These are the purchasing documents. All right, 464. The laboratory shall evaluate suppliers of critical consumables, supplies, and services which affect the quality of testing and calibration, and shall maintain records of these evaluations and list those approved. Typically, perhaps an approved vendors list. We see the word shall there in a couple instances. Shall evaluate and shall maintain records of these evaluations. So one thing that was specified is laboratories shall evaluate critical consumables, supplies, and services which affects the quality of testing and calibration. So as an assessor, that's what I want to see on the lab's approved vendors list, or evaluations being made in conjunction with the testing and or calibration. Items at the top are things that really should be on the approved vendors list in accordance with the 17025 accreditation. Things like paper clips, Chinese takeout menus, or cleaning services. We're looking at more things that are directly impacting the test for calibration, i.e. critical equipment, critical reference materials, critical calibrations that are going to be made. So we had a shall evaluate suppliers. So shall, again, is a requirement. And shall maintain records of these evaluations and list of approved. So I'm sort of looking at it beyond 17025 and the requirements that are specified there. When you think about it, when you are selecting a potential vendor, you're selecting a partner in your business, and you will trust them to work with you in a professional and profitable manner. It is important that you choose a company that can supply your requirements now and future needs. I'm sorry. Got to maintain records of evaluations. This needs to be considered. Should be considered. What sort of records should be kept when you're making these evaluations? Perhaps for traceability, you're going to comply with PJLA's policy PL2. They need to have a copy of the lab scope of accreditation. If you have accuracy and requirement capabilities, the scope of accreditation is going to include the specific ranges and CMCs, calibration and measurement capabilities of the organization. If you're acquiring reference materials, perhaps you're going to require that the company supplier meets ISO Guide 34 requirements for reference material. Other things you may need to consider in this evaluation is years in business. Need to know that the organization is established and ready to service your requirements. Perhaps certification in certain instances, compliant, if they have a compliant quality management system in place. 17025, of course, entails quality management system in Section 4. Perhaps even a certification under 9001 in certain instances could be an example of something you could use as an evaluation of a supplier. Other things to look at in the evaluations, of course, are testimonials and references. These are valuable if you can check that the vendor is reliable as they claim to be. Of course, on-time delivery. You need to know that deliveries can be made when you want them to be. It's something that could be monitored even once you evaluate, approve a vendor. That could be a element for continuing monitoring of the particular vendors to stay on the approved vendors list. And under that requirement, and shall list those approved. Of course, we're going to be looking for evaluation, and we're going to be looking, I'm talking about Wade as a 17025 assessor for an accrediting body, or even you doing an internal audit and looking for compliance to 17025. Typically, during the course of the calibration assessment, I will pinpoint key pieces of equipment and supplies that I see the particular laboratory utilizing. Know they're being used. But take it as far as, let's see the purchasing record, let's see the evaluation, and let's see where these were approved and listed. So typically, we'd be looking for a particular vendor, a assessment, or even an internal audit is a sampling process. So I'm going to sample, pinpoint some critical suppliers and verify that they've ran the gamut of the requirements of Section 4.6 and that they are listed as being approved. So it's not a one-time thing where you put suppliers on your approved vendors list, put it in the file cabinet. It's something that should be reevaluated. An example of why this may be necessary, for example, if you select an organization because perhaps they're accredited, bear in mind that these accreditations expire, they change. So, for example, when we're looking at that certificate for a accredited provider that performs calibrations in temperature and humidity, at that time they were accredited. That particular item was on their scope. Over years, scopes are revised, things are added to them, but also on occasion they're taken off for whatever reason. So you want to assure that the accreditation is current. As you see in this example here, they do have expiration dates. So organizations may choose not to continue their accreditation, may transfer their accreditation, may just completely do away with it. So once put on the approved vendors list or been evaluated and listed as approved, something that should be reevaluated. Okay, like I said, Section 4.6, there's a whole lot of information there, relatively short in nature. There's basically 4 bulleted requirements that we just went over. As you may or may not be aware, 17025 is up for revision. It looks like it's going to be a reality by the end of the year. We're going to be looking at an updated 17025. So doing these webinars, of course, we're still working off of the 2005 17025 page, but depending on the topic, I like to, based on the last committee draft of the standard, look at the topic and see moving forward what it looks like it's going to be transpiring. So that's what I did with the area of purchasing. So one thing, an eye opener, when I looked at the last draft standard that's being voted on for the revised 17025, is you're not going to see a section on purchasing. It appears it's going to come under a section 6.6, externally provided products and services. So both the sections on procurement and subcontracting are going to be under this heading here. They both are going to be considered as externally provided services. External testing and calibration services are basically treated as external services. Note with the new standard, currently, it's not an official standard, so don't hold me to this, but it looks like the latest draft is coming down the wire here, and it appears that these may very likely make it into the official revision of 17025. A note included is products can include, for example, measurement standards and equipment, auxiliary equipment, consumable materials and reference materials. Services can include, for example, calibration services, sampling services, testing services, facilities and equipment maintenance services, proficiency testing services, and assessment and auditing services. So these are all things that a few of them were listed here at the first part when we're looking at critical supplies and services, what needs to be included. Here's a note that expands on what we actually looked at, maintenance services. If you're involved in sampling and you have folks that are going out and doing the sample and bringing those samples back to the testing lab, sample servicing, that would, of course, would be a critical supply. A critical service. Still under the changes. It's going to be very specific. We're referenced the purchase order. Gave an example of things that should be in the purchase order to comply with Section 463. It's very specific here on what needs to be communicated to the external providers. So you're going to have to communicate, and the word is shall there, of course, the product and services to be provided, the acceptance criteria, competence, including any required qualification of personnel, if applicable. It's not in there, but it may not be applicable for certain things. Activities that the lab or its customers intend to perform at the external provider's premises. So these are all things that, if applicable, will need to be communicated to the external provider based on the last committee draft for 17025. Okay. That brings us to the end of the actual presentation. This was a relatively short one. A lot of information there, a lot of important information for complying with 17025, Section 4.6. As always, we allocate some times for questions, so At this point, you should have a place provided for you where you can type in a question. They'll be fielded by our headquarters staff and sent to me. I will provide 5 minutes at this time frame. I'll go silent. Give you an opportunity. At the end of this, after 5 minutes, I'll answer as many as possible. If for whatever reason a question remains unanswered, or perhaps after we sign off here, something has come up that you thought you would have asked, you wish you would have asked, it's not too late. You can still submit that question via webinar at pjlabs.com. So I'll be silent here for the next 5 minutes. I will come back. I'll review any questions that I'm getting, answer as many as I can. Hello, welcome back. Seems like I'm coming to you. My article's audible is coming from the phone here. I have an incoming call right now, sort of. Okay, there we go. Welcome back. Gonna go ahead and got a couple questions here. First, before I get to those, just wanted to give a couple some information here regarding upcoming events at PJLA. First one is actually, like I stated, this webinar I just repeated was from last month, and due to the technical difficulties, I repeated it today. So actually scheduled next week, August 29th, is a regularly scheduled webinar for August, which same time, same station, 29th. Topic's going to be Section 5.5, equipment requirements. Also, for those of you all that are interested, we do offer live training at PJLA, and we have an event coming up next month. We have there's 2-day internal auditors and a 1-day measurement uncertainty workshop coming up. So with 414, with internal auditing, there is a requirement that the internal auditing needs to be done by someone who is trained. So this is an ideal opportunity if you're able to join us and get a good in-depth overview of the standard and some good exercises and case studies and group exercises on internal auditing. Everybody's favorite is measurement uncertainty, which is going to be held day 3, September 21st. That of course is going to be for calibration and testing. So we hope to be very informative. Again, we'll give out some case studies, some examples, some resources, and go over instructional materials in regards to measurement uncertainty as it pertains to both testing and calibration. It's going to be done at our headquarters at West Big Beaver Road in Troy, Michigan. If interested, visit our website, www.pjalabs. Go to the training tab, PJLA training, as far as additional information and information regarding registering for the course. Okay, I got a couple questions here. Bear with me a little bit here. I'm reading them off my phone. This first question is one question is kind of lengthy, and it pertains to the periodic evaluation of critical suppliers, and you're pinpointing a specific example from an assessment, which I'm not sure if I'm exactly following this whole thing. It's documented here. Let me read through this again. Apparently, if I'm reading this correctly, an SOP was updated to include a biennial basis to evaluate at minimum the vendor's licensing terms and conditions. I'm assuming you were written a non-conformist because you did not were shown objective evidence of periodic evaluation of critical suppliers. An SOP was written. So for the repeat deficiency, we had to include this information in the SOP. You're basically stating, I'm assuming that perhaps the assessor wants to see some objective evidence beyond the SOP of the periodic evaluation. and you implemented an evaluation checklist. You're asking me if it seems like overkill. Don't want to second guess any of our assessors, especially in front of an audience without knowing all the facts that went behind this. But typically with an assessment, we're looking for objective evidence. So we have that right to see you're stating something that's going to be done, that in fact it is being done, a record in other words. So perhaps the assessor was looking for objective evidence that was unable to be produced. I'm assuming this. If looking at it from that light, I'm not thinking it's overkill. It was something that was asked for that could not be produced. I'll leave it like that. This is a specific example, but specified in our presentation. Reason is why you need to. It's not a one-time thing. You need to go back and reevaluate your crew vendors. Other question. It's not really pertaining to this in particular. I think I got another one here. Bear with me a second. Like I said, I'm reading these off my phone. When will we be required to implement the updates to 17025 2017? Well, before we can come up with a requirement, it's got to be a standard first. So it looks fairly certain that's going to be done by the end of the year. Hopefully, I'm looking at a lot of the webinars once that is a official and is a recognized standard. The 2017 version 15. It'll be 2017. It has 2015 on here. We're currently at 2005, so we're looking at 2000. If I misspoke and said 2015 instead of 2017, I'm sorry. Hopefully I didn't do that, but it's not done yet. It should be done by the end of the year. We realize there's going to be a transition involved in this. And probably, I'm saying probably, it's going to be a 3-year transition. When I say a 3-year transition, that means you can still be, if you are an accredited lab, still be accredited to the 2005 version. But after 3 years, we're looking at not accrediting labs to the superseded 17025 standard. Everybody would have to come up to par in 2017. So if you are under 2005, let's say it becomes official by the end of the year, I'm thinking you're looking at a 3-year period where you're going to have to make that transition. Not to say you have to take the whole 3 years. You could probably, during your next assessment, make the transition if you want to be the first kid on the block to have the 2017 accreditation. Then I'm assuming you could do that any time during the 3-year transition period. See here, we got a question. Another question just came through here, so I was just reading through it. Apparently, you like the form that was shown on this presentation for the vendor evaluation. Can we get a copy of this? If I remember, I did the presentation. I believe I still have a copy of the form that I used as an example. One of two ways. Like I said, this webinar will be recorded and be available on our website. to be able to get a copy of that slide then. If you'd like to, go ahead and send your specific request into the web address that I specified here, webinarpj.labs.com with your email address. See if I still have that in my folder when I did this presentation, and I'll see if I could get you a copy to use as a reference. Okay, that concludes the questions. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Again, I apologize for last month's technical difficulties. All indications are that I'm coming in loud and clear this time. Hopefully, in a short turnaround time here, looking at next week actually for equipment section 5.5. So hope y'all can join us next week. And even better, hope we can see some of y'all in September. I'll be actually doing the training myself during this 3-day workshop up in Troy, Michigan. My name is Mike Kramer, Calibration Program Manager. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.